got it. There we go.
Hey. Hello, Jeffrey. My name is Veronika Anissimova, and for those who are going to be watching this, I'm honored to speak to a living Canadian composer, Jeffrey Ryan, based in Vancouver, BC, I think. I got to record Jeffrey Ryan's Miss Carr and Seven Scenes for the Linden Project's Synesthesia recital. And it has been a fascinating experience all the way through, from learning something modern, something written 2 years ago, commissioned by people I actually got to work with before. And it's just been fascinating to know that I am learning the music written by someone whom I can actually ask about it. So hi, Jeffrey. It's really exciting to have you here.
Hi, Veronica. It's great to meet you, and I'm really looking forward to our chat and also to hearing you be Emily Carr in this cycle.
So my first question actually is, why Emily Carr? There are lots of Canadian painters. There's, of course, the rest of the group of 7, etc. Why did you gravitate towards a female artist, and how did that happen?
Well, it wasn't that I set out to find a painter to inspire a song cycle. Years ago, when I was living in Cleveland, Ohio, doing my doctorate, I found this book. Well, I didn't buy it new. It was a used book at a used bookshop, and it's the journals of Emily Carr. Mm-hmm. And knowing Emily Carr's reputation and knowing something of her work, I grabbed this book and had a read through. It is 332 pages of diary entries that she wrote over several years. Mm-hmm. As I read through, there was so much that spoke to me, because right at that time, I was just finishing my doctorate and about to embark on, hopefully, a career as a composer, fingers crossed. And so much of what she talked about was her struggle to find her own voice, her struggle to establish her own reputation as an artist, her struggle to communicate what she was trying to communicate through her work. A lot of it was about trying to take what she saw in front of her out in nature and transfer that to the canvas, not so much in a realism kind of way, but in a kind of emotional and spiritual kind of way. And all of those things spoke to me, because a lot of her struggle was very much artistic, but a lot of her struggle was also very much practical. And at that time, as a woman working in a field that was dominated by men, and having to kind of go against the academy as well. She talks often about her dealings with professors of art in Victoria and going to speak to students and how they respond. There were just so many levels that spoke to me for where I was at that time. And so I put that book aside and I thought, someday I'm going to have a chance to set some of these to music. And when the Canadian Art Song Project approached me a few years ago about writing a song cycle, I went back to that because it was something that I'd wanted to do for, well, at that point, 20 years. It had been sitting on my bookshelf, just waiting for the right project to come along. So that's how it came about. It wasn't specifically, I didn't set out looking for a painter. It was Emily's words that inspired me and her life. So that's kind of how it came about.
Right. So then I imagine there were plenty more journal entries in there than the ones that got set to music. What was
do you see all these Post-it notes in this book? Yeah.
what was the process of, was it the ones that touched you the most, or was it that you decided to go with maybe building a specific narrative that would sum up her experience or your experience of reading her entries? What was the process for choosing the seven and a bit? There's, well, one of them is a little bit, the letters.
One's in three parts,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah. But how did you
And
do that?
yeah, it's it's kind of all of the things that you mentioned and more. What I started with was to read through all 332 pages and make a list of the ones that spoke music to me. Because of course she was writing these as journal entries. They're prose. They're not poems. So not everything is going to really work for an art song text.
Mhm.
And the list that I made was very long, as you could see by all those post-it notes. So that was the first narrowing down. Then it was looking at the different themes
Mhm.
that each of those entries spoke to. Um, it might be about finances. It might be about validation. It might be about the mountain. I made notes of each of those entries in terms of what they were about.
Mhm.
What was the overall theme in each of those? And then pulled out from that a shorter list where, if there were several entries that related to struggling to make money, I didn't need to use all of those. I could then pare that down,
Mhm.
right? There were a lot of other things that just didn't make the cut at all. She did talk in more detail about her feelings about the male academics and what they were like.
Mhm.
She talked about living in her caravan, things like that, that weren't so much of the artist's journey of finding one's own voice
Yeah.
and establishing oneself. So it kind of coalesced around that, and then I had to cut it down and cut it down and cut it down. The text, in many cases, in each of the songs, is not necessarily one long journal entry.
Mhm.
Sometimes the opening lines or the closing lines are from a different spot in her journals that
Yeah.
maybe just kind of set up the scene.
Mhm.
And it's also a question of finding the narrative, which you also touched on, because I think of art song as little opera scenes, that there is a character, there is backstory, there's a whole scene with this, even though it may just be a voice and a piano. The piano is like the opera orchestra in a lot of ways. It's adding the subtext, it's setting the scene, while the singer is expressing the emotion and the character and all of those things. So it's important in a cycle like this, because I think of it as a monodrama, that it does have a narrative. So very loosely, it's chronological.
Mhm.
There's an initial struggle at the beginning, and then she kind of finds towards the end this validation. Uh, she starts to make some money from it towards the end, and she talks about the reviews, and she talks about what, from the perspective of being in her 60s and having worked her whole life as an artist, what being an artist means to her. And that became a great way to kind of sum up that journey. It goes through a lot of different emotions along the way. Some of them are kind of funny, and some of them are really poignant.
Yeah.
So it's all of those things. It's all of those things to kind of create a kind of libretto, but as an art song. It's kind of in between song and theater, which really interests me in the world of art song.
Mhm. Yeah, that was to me very exciting to feel like it was more than separate little pieces that are just going in a certain order. It was very much like a journey from point A through several points and then to point B. There was something cathartic near the end because you can feel that she has arrived artistically, emotionally. There's definitely a buildup, which is it's really exciting as a performer. But I actually wanted to ask, if this is one big opera scene, what role does the piano play in it? Is it the orchestra? Is it the Greek chorus? Is it a bit of both? Is it her subconscious kind of, leading her emotionally from, what she said last to what she says next? What is it? Because I felt very supported as a singer throughout by
Oh, that's good.
for sure. But of course, I'm feeling different things from it. Sometimes it feels like it's kind of my mental process, whatever's happening, what the pianist is playing. And sometimes it feels like it's actually introducing something new. So I was wondering how you thought of it, how you came up with the music of it.
You've largely answered the question already in terms of what what's in the piano did for you as the performer and as the character. Um, the piano is very much playing the same role of the opera orchestra. It's saying what you are not saying sometimes, right? Which it sounds like you found places where it was like that. Sometimes it's simply setting the scene. Generally, in the context of each song, I I look at what the text is saying and what's the character that's going on here, what's happening to Emily at that point, where's she coming from. This is how I would approach any song text, and I try to find something in that scene that becomes the foundation for the character of the piano, if that makes sense. So, for example, in one of the letters songs, the first of the letters songs, she says, "I've written reams of horrid letters."
Yeah.
To people where she's sent out her paintings, she sent them out cold to galleries, and she never hears back from them. And as a composer, that speaks to me because we send out scores all the time to people. We send them out cold, and we never hear back, right? And there's lots of reasons for that, but it doesn't mean that you don't send them out. But it can be frustrating sometimes when you don't get any response from that. She was writing in the time that she was writing, and so she wasn't sending an email.
Yeah.
The piano is a typewriter. That is her typing all of those letters. And sometimes it's like because she's kind of worked up about it too. So it's not always at the same tempo. And as her emotion changes in the course of it, where the piano is tonally changes. And it's a lot of whole tones in the piano, right? Because she's very exercised about this, that it's frustrating as an artist to send out this work and to not be taken seriously and to be not given the respect of a response, or people hanging on to her stuff and then and never responding and putting it up on their walls in the gallery, and then 2 years goes by and she hasn't heard anything. So there's an example of the piano just really setting the scene. You can imagine Emily just sitting frustrated at this typewriter over and over and over. Another one of the letters, the last one, which is called Compliments Hannah Lund, is about her getting a fan letter.
Yeah.
And it's this is the climax of the piece for me. because it's a moment where she she gets the validation of knowing that what she's been trying to communicate has actually reached someone,
Yeah.
that she's succeeded in conveying what she sees, and it's reached Hannah Lund, and Hannah finds um, divinity in looking at that painting, which is called Peace. And that's exactly through the book, through all of her journal entries. That's one of the things that she's trying to convey. She's trying to convey a sense, a glimpse of God, which is one of the other songs. That's how she approaches what art can do. And at the end, she cries because she's so touched by that. The piano in that is a single line, a melody in the upper voice of the piano, and every time that little phrase repeats, it's harmonized differently.
Yes.
So it's very simple and very serene, but there's movement
Within
in
it.
the harmonies
Mm-hmm.
underneath, and that's another element. The final song, at the beginning of it, she reads a review about how her work is essentially Canadian.
Yep.
And what's going on in the piano underneath that is do you know what it is?
Oh, Canada. Yes.
It's O Canada. It's the opening of O Canada, just overlapping. And there's another one. This is another little test for you, Veronika. The end of A Glimpse of God.
Oh.
Do you know what it is?
Happy birthday.
It's Happy Birthday, because the song starts out with it's my birthday tomorrow, I think. And then at the end, she's talking about what she thinks art is.
They're very.
And you're not. Did you get it? When did it dawn on you that that's what it is? Because it's kind of disguised.
Well, I actually got to coach it once with Stephen Wilcox, who.
Oh yeah.
And
who commissioned it?
Yeah. He kind of showed it to me, but it was pretty obvious. I mean, it's very cleverly disguised, but I can hear it, and once you see it, you can't unsee it. So I love that.
Yeah, those are fun little things to do. Stephen's clearly told you all the secrets of the piece. Thank you, Stephen. I'm trying to think of the Rhythm in Space song. It's kind of I imagine her at the canvas, just trying to figure it out. As a composer, I sit at my desk with the manuscript paper and my pencil and back and forth to the piano, just trying to, what is it that I'm hearing? What is it that I'm hearing? What is it that I'm hearing? What are those notes? What are those rhythms? And trying something and not getting it quite right, and coming back the next day and revising it. And I imagine her doing a similar kind of thing of trying to get a sense of rhythm and space onto the canvas, and not getting it quite right, and just the repetition of that.
Her thinking,
Yes, and that's what's in the piano.
Yeah, I definitely felt that. As a singer, I'm sure you understand, it's the exact same thing. You submit audition videos all the time. You might never hear back. You might get rejected. I absolutely, on an artistic level, related to the entire thing, because as a singer, you keep searching for your voice, literally. And it's new every day, and it's a little bit different. And you keep searching for, you keep trying to climb that mountain, whether it be the career mountain, more financially speaking, or artistically, just becoming better at your craft. It's all the same, which is why I found it very poignant and meaningful. I wanted to ask, actually, in A Glimpse of God, why sort of a fugal style when she begins to think about what it means to be an artist? it really makes me think of Bach, and it's this beautiful kind of Baroque motif. Why that?
She is talking in that poem. It's not a poem, sorry.
Well, her entry.
She is talking in that journal entry about, firstly, what art isn't.
Mm.
And all of the things that she mentions are very academic things to me.
Mhm.
It's how someone kind of interpreting a painting from an academic perspective might say it's a collection of objects or whatever.
A certain effect of light and shade.
A
Mhm.
certain effect of light and shade, like just in terms of the mechanics
Mhm.
of how to do that. And she's trying to get past that,
Mhm.
that a picture is a glimpse of God.
Yeah.
Again, as a composer, I put all of the craft that I can, all of the mechanics
Mhm.
into a piece, but it's not about that.
Yeah.
I'm trying to go beyond that and touch the performers, who can then go on to touch the audience, right, and to convey this whole journey. Um, so I wrote something that's very Bach-like and a fugue,
Mhm.
because that's a very structured, mechanical is maybe not the right word, but it's very structured. And I mean, when we go to music school and we take counterpoint, one of the assignments is to write a fugue.
Yeah.
You know, that's part of our, you know, sort of the conventional musical education
Yeah.
at university,
Mhm.
right? So, and I love listening to Bach, and it's challenging to write a fugue.
Yes.
That's part of the art,
Okay. I see.
and
Yeah.
so that's why, you know. But there is, in a certain way, something academic about a fugue.
Yeah.
And so it to me it makes sense, because when it stops being about the things that art is not,
Mhm.
the fugue ends and it becomes happy birthday. But it also becomes happy birthday as bells,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
right?
Yeah. The bells is what I heard first, and then my eyes
Yeah,
to the happy.
yeah,
Okay,
exactly.
that completely makes sense. Well, I actually have a question also about rhythm and space, which you mentioned.
Okay.
And this kind of brings us back to, you know, the whole concept of the recital, that this is going to be part of. So there's a moment in rhythm and space when she moves away from the rhythm and space. She starts to talk about colors, use of color, contrast, complementary colors. And there's this really beautiful shift that keeps happening between the harmonies, where she is playing with this color and then she's moving back to this palette of colors. Um, are you somebody who experiences synesthesia? Do you hear colors? Do you see colors when you hear music? Are you, because it sounds like you might be that kind of person, because it's obvious in the music that the different harmonies do depict exactly what she's talking about. So I was wondering.
That's that's such an interesting question. And obviously it connects to the whole theme of the Linden Project's recital.
Yeah.
Um, I would not say that I see colors specifically.
Mhm.
It's very interesting that when we talk about sound, we talk about it in a visual way.
Mhm.
We always use visual words
Yeah.
to try to describe sound, which is kind of bizarre. But I would say I don't see colors, but I feel colors.
Okay.
So where something, so my music doesn't really work if you transpose it.
Okay.
Because if something's like when I hear something at a particular pitch level,
Hmm.
that's where it is for what the emotion and
Hmm.
the effect that I'm wanting to convey. That's where that needs to be.
Hmm.
So if you want to speak about keys, D flat major and B major feel really different to
Yeah,
me.
me too.
Yeah. And I think that as we spend more and more of our lives listening to music and experiencing music, I think that we can start to kind of connect those what a certain key does for us as individuals, how we react to that. Because I know that people who do have synesthesia don't see the same colors for the same pitches.
Yeah, yeah.
Like if somebody listens to a C, that's one color for one person and a different color for another person. And I think sometimes it is an emotional response. There are many times that I can hear a particular pitch. I don't have perfect pitch, but I have a very reliable G flat because it was the opening note of a song that I really liked singing in high school in the little pop choir that I was in.
Uh-huh.
And that's just so songs that I hear a lot.
Hmm.
I can replay those
Yeah,
recordings
yeah.
in my head, and yeah, you're probably the same. I think a lot of people are the same. Not everyone can do that, as I learned some years ago at a party. Somebody was talking about a certain recording, and I said, well, can't you just replay it in your head? And they looked at me like, no, can you do that? I'm like, yeah. So I mean, we all kind of take in sound in different ways. But certainly, I work very hard to find the right pitch level and the right change in harmony, all of those things to convey what I'm trying to convey. And if it's transposed, it just feels wrong to me. It conveys something different, and that's why I do have a cycle for baritone, which didn't get performed a lot. So just to increase its chances, I transposed it up a tone for tenor, and it sounds completely wrong to me.
Oh.
It's when I hear each song start, it's like that's not right. That's not the right note. That's not the right note. Even though it fits better, I mean, it fits perfectly for a tenor's voice. So it's very much a feeling color for me,
Mhm.
as opposed to a seeing color.
Right. Well, I mean, it's known that there are certain composers in the art song repertoire who do not like to be transposed. I think Fauré is, I've heard it said that Fauré's songs should not be transposed. He was aiming for a very specific color, for example. But as someone who comes from a historical performance background, where we keep shifting around from 440 into 415 and back, it does really change the piece. Just that semitone, I know how much it affects it, but I'm so used to it too, because it's, we don't all have harpsichords at home. So you practice at whatever pitch you have.
Yeah. But that's got to be totally crazy making.
Yeah, yeah. And I think I am someone who used to have perfect pitch, and then that messed with it a little bit.
I knew someone years ago who was a clarinetist who had perfect pitch,
Mhm.
and it meant that her perfect pitch was a major second off. Because
Right.
the perfect pitch
Yeah.
was to the clarinet, right? Um, so that was kind of crazy. Um, yeah, it brings up an interesting point too that I have sensed in Baroque music, um, is that when you hear early music performance and something's at A415,
Mhm.
it is almost an A flat, and flat keys to me feel warm
Mm-hmm.
and in many cases calming,
Uh-huh.
as opposed to A major, which is very bright,
Yes.
um, D major. Those are very bright keys. E major is especially bright.
Mm-hmm.
Um, when you listen to early music performance at the lower pitch, you're listening to everything in flat keys, which
Yeah.
have a completely different effect,
Yeah.
and I think a more interesting effect for me as an audience member.
Mm-hmm. Right. Yeah. Yeah. It's a totally different experience. Not to mention that it's maybe vocally a little bit easier, but just that shift into it feels more grounded in many cases. It's just
Hmm.
more fulfilling.
Hmm.
I wanted to ask, so I thought it was interesting. I can see, and I completely agree that the real shift, the turning point in the cycle is when Emily Carr realizes that finally she has reached someone's soul with her work. But for me, it's the next song, A Movement Floating Up, that
Hmm. Hmm.
the absolute, it's so lyrical. It's probably the calmest one of them all in a way, but to me, it's just the pinnacle of that well, the artistic essence of what she's trying to achieve. It's where she's actually creating and she's not impeded by the worries about the finances and the reactions. She's just painting. It's an entire song about the creation of her work. And I wanted to thank you for that one specifically because it's
Oh, thank
so
you.
beautiful.
It's hopefully expressing that moment of bliss for an artist when you're just so you're kind of, I mean, I don't, she would never say in the zone, but you're in that space of creativity, just as you describe,
Mhm.
where time kind of stops,
Yeah.
and the piano is just moving up and moving up and lifting. It was a, it was a little bit. I thought very hard about including that one because most of the focus in terms of painting is painting a mountain. And
Yeah.
this isn't about painting the mountain, it's about painting the sky
Mm.
above the mountain, that's the subject.
Yeah.
So that kind of, it added a different kind of subject matter.
Yeah.
But I really like what she says in it, and just becoming a part of that movement.
Yeah, well, to
Is
me,
the
the
way.
fact that it's also not for once she has taken a break from the mountain, to me, in a way that,
True. Yeah.
yeah, it's even better because it's like a little interlude. But she's been on that journey, but this is just her drawing, her painting, and she's not worried about that mountain for a few minutes, which to me is actually maybe even better. The fact that it's not about the mountain, because
Yeah.
she'll get
Yeah.
there anyway by the end.
Well, I'm touched that it's such a powerful moment for you as a performer, because that's part of what I'm doing as a composer. I'm trying to create things that you can come and add yourself to, and take all of these layers and take them to the audience. It's interesting too, the subject being sky, because in Rhythm and Space she talks, as you mentioned earlier, about trying complementary colors and things like that.
Mhm.
When I was working on this cycle, I had occasion to go up to Whistler for the first time, as it happened, where the Audain gallery is, which has a huge Emily Carr collection.
Mhm.
When I looked at what they had in the gallery at the time, I could look at a sky that was blue and I could see the orange that she used.
Aha.
I could see in her paintings from different points in her life what she wrote about that she was trying to do. So
Right.
a blue sky with complementary orange in it, it was right there in front of me. I could see it.
That's the one that she was writing about, right? Probably.
Well, I mean, it was something that she was experimenting with. So
Yeah.
there were probably many paintings from that time where the sky has complementary colors in it and the
Mhm.
greens have purples. And when you look at a lot of her, um, like cedars and trees, you see the green, but you see purple
Mhm.
in it. She'll use purple.
Yeah.
And what is the complementary color to green? It's
Um, red.
red. It's
Red.
red.
Pink
So
is
you'll see reds
yeah.
and purples and yellows. You see all of those to try to convey something indescribable
Hmm.
on the canvas.
Yeah. Oh, that must have been fascinating to see exactly that which you are setting to music in a way.
For sure, for sure. And to have read her all of these journal entries and to have a sense of what she was struggling to do and how she was trying to find her voice. And this was one thing that she experimented with for a while.
Yeah. Huh. Well, I think I've run out of questions to ask you.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
What what kind of work outside of just learning the notes and the music did you bring to exploring this piece and this character?
Right. So of course the text came first, and of course I had to learn the pitches and all of that. Um, I appreciated, I mean, every composer is different. I really appreciated how obvious the dramatic intent was in the relationship between the music and text in your work. A lot of time for me, even outside of, English art song and this specific cycle, I really do think that that performance element is important. I enjoy making any art song, even if it's, Schubert, Fauré, doesn't matter, relevant and emotionally poignant for the audience. So I spent a lot of time trying to understand why you set that word in that way, because that then has to dictate the way I deliver it dramatically. And so I spent a lot of time, of course, just practicing over and over, but every time trying to see what makes sense emotionally and dramatically, and what doesn't. So that I would say that's the bulk of my practicing. It's once you've got the pitches and the text and you've memorized it all, then it comes down to why. And it was, of course, some of it is quite challenging music. So sometimes it's a little bit more cerebral, and you don't have that much mental energy to give to the emotional aspect necessarily. But as often as possible, I tried to understand why she's saying it here and why she's singing that high A, um, things
On
like
the
that.
word high,
Yeah, I think that one that
that
needs
was kind of obvious.
um yeah, things like that. I think just being alone in my room and trying to become the Miss Emily Carr of your set, emotionally
Mhm.
was 90% of the work for me. I think that's where it becomes art. That's where it can touch people. Because obviously the structure, just as you said, the structure isn't enough. The pitches and the words are just the beginning, and it's about making it my own in a way, which takes kind of getting to know her as well as possible. So that would be my answer.
Yeah, and you know what? That's what the song "A Glimpse of God"
Mhm.
is about. It's about all of the practicalities and the mechanics, and then once that's in place, going past it.
Yeah.
And I love that you say that you find a way to make it your own,
Mhm.
because that's a really important thing for me as a composer. I look at the printed music as the blueprint, and my job is to put down on the page as clearly as I can and as succinctly as I can um, what my intention is, and then to turn that over to you,
Mhm.
and you take that blueprint and then you lift it off the page and add yourself to it. And Ethan adds himself to it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So because it's very much a partnership,
Yeah. Yeah.
I never think of the piano as purely accompaniment. It's so much more, and that's one of the things that I love about art song is that it's a team. It really is a team.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, but I actually do have a question. So, as a composer, you have written a piece of music, you've kind of let it go into the ether, and now this random singer and a random pianist, they've taken
Random.
well, and it's out of your control what happens to it, right? We might do something to it that goes so strongly against what you were envisioning in a way. Maybe we're just not going to deliver a certain part of it the way you imagined. How do you let go of that control as an artist? Because your profession, in sort of in the scope of the professions in music, is, I mean, it's a little bit helpless, right? At the end of the day, you can't do anything to the performer when they're performing your work. It's done, it's out of your hands. How do you handle that?
I don't know that it's something that I really think of. As I said, I look at my role as providing the blueprint.
Mm-hmm.
And every performer is going to bring themselves. And that means that every performance is going to be a little different. And even if you were to perform this piece 5 times, every time is going to be a little bit different. You're going to be in a slightly different headspace. You're going to find something different in that moment that you're going to bring to the performance. That's part of live performance, which is what I love. One thing that I don't write is electronic music because I love the collaboration with the performers. Even if I'm not at a rehearsal and coaching, the collaboration is that I've put the blueprint on the page, and that's our point of collaboration.
Mm-hmm.
And then you're collaborating with the audience. It's really a triangle, right? It's the composer and the words together on the page. It's the performers and it's the audience, and all of those
Mm-hmm.
participants are equal. Like I said earlier, my goal is to put on the page as clearly as possible what my intention is.
Mm-hmm.
And I know that every performer is going to go to that first. And as you said, figuring out, so why did he set it this way? Why is it this rhythm on this? Why is this off the beat where I kind of naturally want to put it on the beat, or whatever? What is that conveying dramatically? Those things are there, and you're going to do the best that you can. If you want to say, for example, something in terms of tempo, I'm going to put down what I envision to be the right tempo, but the real tempo is going to be what is right for those two performers on that day in that room. It's going to be somewhere around
Mm-hmm.
what I've written, but you might say, as you're putting a piece together, I really feel this wants to move a little more. I need this to move a little more. Or can we take some time here? These are small things that allow you to add the shape on top of my shape.
Mm-hmm.
When I'm sitting in an audience, I'm I'm not nervous about the piece at all. What I'm doing is being excited for the performers and hoping that it goes as best it can to honor all of the work that the performers have put into it, many hours. And if something it's live performance. Sometimes things get off. You know, when you're listening to an orchestra, you hear a wrong entry, or and that just happens. Like, oh, the timpani's a beat off. Okay, now they're right. They figured it out, and it just these things. One of the fascinating things too, when you talk about memorizing, which always amazes me for singers, how much music you have to keep in your heads and in your bodies, so that you can really look at the audience. And it is that is one of the things too about art song that I love, is that when it is memorized, there's nothing between you and the audience. You're communicating directly. There's no music stand. You're not looking down at any time. And it's not to say that looking down can create a disconnect from the audience, but it's an enhanced connection when you are able to look straight out. And in fact, in A Glimpse of God, I ask that you pick out someone in the audience to look at, which can be quite fun in performance, and in a way, I think for some singers can be a little unnerving, because when you sing, you're generally singing to the whole audience, and to have a little phrase that you just look someone in the eye and you look someone else in the eye, that's a whole different kind of connection, which I think is kind of fun. But part of what I like to do with art song and music in general is kind of push the dramatic box that it might be in, and just push that out a little bit. But really, when I listen to someone performing something that I've written, something that I know everything that went into it more than anybody else that's listening to it, if something is a bit different from what I put on the page, it's that was interesting. Did that work? Did it not? That's more a question of, did that work for me or did it not work for me? It doesn't mean that it didn't work for the audience, right? Who are coming at it fresh, and that to them is what it is. And if you can convey that convincingly, dramatically, and make that work, that's more power to you, I say. That's part of the collaborative nature of the composer and the performer.
That's very reassuring to hear, because
oh, now you're going to tell me, because I haven't heard your performance yet. You're going to tell me about all the things that you've changed.
No, but I mean, as most of us musicians, we perform works written by people who are long gone, and you often wonder, I mean, so many of them are on a pedestal at this point, and you always wonder, oh no, I sang this little wrong. Would he hate me? Would I be fired? It's like, what would the composer think? And so it's really reassuring to hear from a living composer that it remains a collaborative process, and it's okay to let it go and transform into what it will be with the best intentions.
I certainly don't speak for every composer, because you mentioned earlier, every composer is different. But I'm very much a collaborative kind of composer. It's I'm putting things on the page, but then it's, how is that working for you? And here's what I'm thinking. What are you thinking? When you look at a text, for example, what speaks to you in a particular text versus what spoke to me? And maybe it lines up, but maybe there's another layer that you see that I didn't see, but that you want to convey. And can you make that work? That's why I love working with performers.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Jeffrey. It's been really interesting.
My pleasure, Veronika. I am really, really looking forward to seeing and hearing what Miss Carr is to you.
We did our best, but it's really interesting to hear, well, a creator's thoughts on his own work, and there are some things that I didn't realize. I didn't realize it was a typewriter. I knew it was something in that spirit, but I didn't think, oh, it's this. I didn't think of the word, obviously she's typing. And now I completely, I hear it.
And now everyone tuning in will hear it as well,
Yeah,
since we told them. But what's interesting too is for every audience member, they're going to hear what they hear in it.
Mhm.
And that's, like I said, the third part of the triangle, the equilateral triangle,
Mhm.
that is the performance. Each audience member is going to hear something that speaks to them that isn't necessarily going to be what the person next to them hears. And that's great. I want those layers. I want people to bring their own experience to the performance.
Mhm. Yeah, well, I hope everyone enjoys it. This is going to be Jeffrey Ryan's Miss Carr in 7 scenes. So thank you so much.
My pleasure. And thank you, Linden Project.
Thank you. Yes.